Hi, this is Shauna. Before we get to today's guest, I want to take a minute to learn more about you, the listener. We've put together a short survey at fueltalent.com/podcast to gather information on who's listening and to give you a chance to make suggestions and comments about the show. I want What Fuels You to be a great resource for you and your interests, and I hope these interviews give you practical advice along with inspiration for your career and life. Help us continue to serve you better by going to fueltalent.com/podcast. Thank you so much. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Katherine Sizov. Katherine is the CEO and co-founder of Strella, a biosensing hardware and software company that provides data to optimize the produce supply chain and decrease losses due to food waste. She started the company when she read that 40% of food was wasted before being consumed. Now Strella has helped Washington State apple and pear growers organize their inventory based on shelf life to reduce food waste and improve the overall quality. Katherine studied molecular biology at the University of Pennsylvania, where she further explored her passion for applied science and food. Welcome, Katherine. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I'm going to hit you first with some rapid fire.
Sounds great.
Okay. What is your favorite cuisine or favorite thing to eat?
I've been on a big Indian kick lately, particularly chickpeas, because I don't think I've ever really learned how to cook them super well. So just trying to get good at that.
Yeah, like making like hummus?
Just like chickpea dishes. So first of all, I'm one of those people that used to just buy cans of them, and then apparently that's not cool. So I've been actually soaking them and then preparing them with usually some kind of vegetable to go alongside, or just in kind of like a stir fry.
Yeah, well, I think that's very healthy. They're like a superfood, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your favorite way to unwind?
I love going on walks, hikes, enjoying sunsets.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could do those all at the same time, which is
exactly.
a great combo.
Porque no los dos, right?
Okay, 3 words that other people use to describe you as a leader.
Oh man, I think probably straightforward is one of them. I think it's not really a word, but gets it done, and then purpose-driven.
Nice. Those are good ones. Gets it done, I guess. Driven?
Yeah, I guess so.
Efficient? I don't know.
It's not always efficient, honestly, but it gets done.
Aspirationally efficient. What did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Astronaut. Still kind of want to be an astronaut.
Well, you're young, so you have like you could do 2.0, 3.0, build this company, go be an astronaut.
Maybe after this one. Yeah.
What have you read, listened to, or watched that, if you have time, that you'd recommend?
I just read recently read a book called Stolen Focus, which I thought was really good. It's about how, we get distracted by phones and computers and things, and how we can mitigate that. Stolen
Focus. Okay, I'm writing that one down. I don't always write things down during the podcast, but this one's good for me.
It's really good. It's a little sad. Especially there's a chapter about kids and like the autonomy of children and how kids don't really know how to play like free games anymore, and they're not used to like their parents just letting them outside and just playing. That's a little sad, but I think in general it's a really good book. It's a really eye-opening one too.
Yeah, I definitely want to read it. If there was a book written about you and your life so far, what would it be called?
Oh my God. Oh man. What would it be called? it probably have the word adventure in it, I think, because that's what this all feels like is one crazy, messy, but super exciting adventure.
Yeah, fun. Okay, this is my final rapid fire for you. If you could choose to have a superpower, what would it be?
I think it would be kind of the King Solomon answer of ultimate knowledge in the world.
Oh, can you imagine? Just
Yeah,
like all knowing, all being. I
yeah,
can't.
or just like having all of the knowledge of humans in your head at once. But I guess that's what ChatGPT is for. So
All of our problems are solved, and
yeah,
we can
we're good.
drop the mic. We're going to be on a walk. You guys just solve that. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so I know you're first generation American. Your family moved here, and you grew up in Boston and then Virginia. Is that right?
Yep. So I grew up, yeah, mostly in Virginia as a kid, and then for college I moved to Philly.
And what brought your family here?
So basically, in the Soviet Union, surprise, surprise, there wasn't really great medical treatment, and so my older sister had cancer, and my family was looking for a way to get treatment. And the United States obviously has a great, well, there's a lot of debate about that, but certainly a better medical system than in the Soviet Union at the time. And so this was kind of a bastion, safe haven for them, and so they did their best to get out of there and here.
And how was that for them? And how do you think that experience, as far as their life views, shaped you?
I actually think my dad is very much a hippie, which is kind of a weird combination coming from the Soviet Union, and so I think America really suits him. He's a developer engineer, and so the company he worked for was like, you know what, we've been wanting to start an American office division, and you'll be the first one here, and I think that will solve your problems. And so I think we learned how to rely on our community, trust people from a very, very early onset. And then also, again, like I am a pretty big fan of the United States as a result. I guess that's like a standard first gen thing.
Yeah. And how's your sister? Did she get the medical treatment that she needed? And
She did get the treatment she needed, but she got diagnosed with another cancer a couple years later, unfortunately died.
oh God.
But yeah, I we did what we could, you know.
Yeah. And your family left their family, so that must have been hard because your parents are still in the Soviet Union.
Yes, yes, they were and are. So I actually grew up going to Russia in the summers, especially, and kind of spending my summers in the forests in Russia, kind of in the rural areas. It is weird how different it is. I think the culture is pretty dramatically different. I think, you know, especially with like what's currently going on, it's interesting to see even where miscommunication happens or like how different cultures react to the same thing. Um, I I mostly, like I said, spend my time in Moscow and then also kind of a little bit on the outside of Moscow. And it's actually the climate and the nature looks a lot like the PNW. So lots of evergreen forests, lots of lakes and rivers. It's really beautiful, especially in the summer. In the winter, it gets a little bit dicey for sure. It's all just a blanket of like white snow.
Yeah. And when your family moved, were they seeking out a Russian community, or were they like, hey, now we're in the US and we're completely going to assimilate?
Yeah, so the first thing, what my parents told me, the first thing they did was actually go to church because church is your kind of community in the United States very often. And those were kind of the first people that brought them in. They made friends with their neighbors. Their first house wasn't a house, it was just an attic in a really welcome family's house. And so they very much relied on the community and were like, well, we're here, we're speaking English, we're learning English, and that's what I did.
Yeah. And so I know that I read also that you guys lived near Harvard. And then tell me about the part where you were like looking for parts. I read that your dad and you would go try to find parts that were like scrapped and they weren't using.
Yeah, so we moved to Colorado. That was kind of the first spot, and I was born there actually. I was born in America. So I was born in Boulder, Colorado, and then we moved to Massachusetts to continue my sister's treatment. in Boston. So around that time is I was like a pretty young kid, and my dad used to go to the Harvard University, like I guess sort of like a yard sale, except everything's free and in a dumpster. So basically the way it worked was that the university is like fairly well off, and they had a bunch of stuff that, you know, regular people usually can't afford or might need. So he would look at all the computer equipment. Basically, universities will dump all their computers after a couple of years, but they're still working and in good condition. And my dad's very good at that stuff. So he would go to the computer section and like dig up components there. And then in order to prevent me as a kid from running away, I was super hyperactive. He would put me in one of the actual dumpsters. And the one that he would put me in was the biomedical one. So inside there were things like PCR machines or broken centrifuges and things like that. And so I kind of grew up like literally surrounded by biotech equipment. And I think what was really cool to me was that I would create like games in my head around like what all these things were to entertain myself. But then I would bring them to my dad and be like, what are these things actually? And he was like, I have no freaking idea. And to me, that was really exciting, because when your parents when you realize that your parents don't have ultimate knowledge as a kid, that's like very exciting to you. And so I think that's what initially sparked my interest in science.
And so were you a good student in all subjects, or was like science your jam?
I don't think I ever was a great student, honestly speaking.
Well, you had to have been, because you went to University of Pennsylvania. I mean, you had to have been.
And people can say imposter syndrome all they want, but I got recruited. So I like to think of myself as the little fish in a big pond. So I got recruited via sports to a smart school, is the way that I look at it. So I feel like I always tend to squeeze into things that I'm underqualified for, but I think it serves a great purpose.
So I guess you had like your subjects that you were good at, some obviously we all have that you weren't so good at, and you went there for fencing, right?
I did, yes. And I did really love science. In high school, I spent a lot of time at the National Institutes of Health. I had some amazing mentors there that really just instilled a love for learning and molecular biology alongside other things in me. So yes, I out of all the subjects, my grades are definitely best there.
Yeah. Do you remember a moment or a conversation or something where you had that kind of epiphany that like, I am into this, like I love molecular biology? What were you doing at the time, or what was the conversation about that it kind of clicked?
Yeah, so actually, I was fencing at my little club when I was like 15 or 16. And what's cool, what I've always loved about fencing is that people of all ages do fencing. And so as a 15-year-old, I was exposed to people who were well into their careers, people who are a decade, 2 decades, 5 decades older than me. And so this one guy got to talking about what he does. And he was basically a pre-med student in college, and he was working in a lab. It sounded really interesting to me. And so I eventually convinced him to give me the email of his boss. And I asked if I could also maybe do some intern work for them.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about fencing. Who introduced you to fencing? It feels like, I don't know if they had fencing at my high school.
Yeah, I didn't either. I've always been into martial arts. I've always kind of liked fighting. Like I like to joke that in fight or flight, I've usually picked the fight. And so I guess my parents were like, is there a way to turn this into college? And so so I think, yeah, well, later in my teen years, they're like, okay, well, can you just try this other like martial art? And I really took a liking to it. I really like fencing. It's a combination of physical and mental, which actually is the reason why I wanted to be an astronaut too, is I like doing both.
Are you still doing it?
I am. There's actually a club in Seattle. It's like 1.5 miles from my office and in downtown. It's a little
That's so cool. I'd say you've probably met a really good group of friends and community just through fencing. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool. Like the first moment I stepped into the Seattle club, like I saw someone that I had fenced with in college, and we used to compete together, but now we're like friends.
You're like, okay, fine, now I'll let you in. So you went to University of Pennsylvania. What other schools did you apply to or were pursuing you, or did you consider? And in reflecting back, was it the right choice?
Yeah, so the way recruiting worked for me was that I kind of like did initial interviews or kind of sussed out the vibe from coaches early on. So I had a couple of schools that I was interested in, and then I applied even before early decision, and where they kind of pre-vetted my application, and then they told me whether or not I was likely to make it in. And so the way that I did it was I just went to the best schools that I could until someone told me no. So, for example, I had been told that I would likely make it into Penn, and so I went to Harvard, and I was like, "Will you guys take me?" And they said, "Girl, no." So then I was like, "Okay, that doesn't work." But yeah, I think the two schools I was looking at were Cornell and Penn.
Yeah. And so Penn was the right choice.
Yeah, I really love Penn. Well, first of all, I got so much out of it from an entrepreneurship standpoint, but also in terms of the location, it's so good to be around a city when you're in school. When final exams are kicking in and everyone's stressed out, freaking out, it's really nice to just be able to go on a walk and then like see regular people, not freaked out about something that doesn't matter. And then also just have the ability to experience a city when you're in college.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not something I had thought about, but that totally makes sense. So when you're considering Penn, tell me about the things that you weighed. So you're thinking, okay, do I like the coach? Do I like the location? How's their molecular biology program? I'm guessing. What kind of like scholarship or opportunity are they giving me? Like there's a whole bunch of things that go into that decision. What amount of weight were you giving molecular biology? Like, I guess my big question is, at that stage of life, did you have any sense of what you wanted to be? Like you still weren't going to be an astronaut, or you at that point you were thinking astronaut?
I was definitely still thinking astronaut because I think a lot of astronauts come with science degrees. So I was like, okay, this is like still on the path, I'm not going into the military. I don't think I can handle that one. But I'm still going to continue on the science path. And I do really like this particular field that I've gotten myself into. So was certainly considering that. And then obviously I think financial aid was kind of the biggest question for us.
Yeah. And so when you chose your major, um, were you thinking, like I have to go find some internships, or who was helping you along the way? Because it's not something that your dad had studied, or, going through the American process of college apps. Like who was guiding all this?
My parents have done a fantastic job of actually figuring out like school in the US. So big kudos to them. But in terms of my career, I think like I said, I was really fortunate to be surrounded by people who really love their job. Whether that was like my mentors at NIH, or when I came to Penn, all the folks I worked with in labs. And so they kind of guided me. I just hung around them. And at some point, I mean, the natural track is to go to grad school, right? And so that was kind of where I was going to be going.
Yeah. And what disrupted that as far as, well, first of all, what work were you doing in the labs? What were some of the things you were working on?
Yeah, I was working on neuromuscular disorders. So I started with like muscular dystrophy and figuring out how it happens, what causes muscular dystrophy. And then I moved more towards like autism spectrum disorders later on. A lot of my work involved mice. It's actually kind of funny. Um, if you want to tell if a mouse is antisocial, you basically put it into a cage. And on one side of the cage, you put a rock, and on the other side of the cage, you put another mouse. And then you just see how much time the mouse spends with the rock versus the other mouse. And if it's a normal mouse, it's going to spend basically all of its time with the other mouse. But if it's antisocial, it's going to go and spend a lot of time with the rock. So I spent a lot of time looking at mice and rocks when I was at Penn.
Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. Like how many hours can you sit and watch that? That's like, wow.
Many hours, because the other thing is it's also pretty subjective, right? Like how much time did each mouse spend? And so they're like, well, we need one person to collect all the data for
Of
all the
course.
mice in this lab.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't control for too many things. Like you have to have the
exactly.
consistency there. That's so funny. So did you graduate? Did you just graduate in 2019?
Yes, I did.
And you're already like kicking ass, crushing it. I guess when you graduated, what was the plan, and how did you get here? Like walk me through this from 2019 to Strella. Like What was the whole path there?
Yeah, so around my junior year, I started thinking about like what's next. And again, the natural kind of next step would be graduate school. And I don't know, my heart kind of felt heavy for some reason. That just wasn't really, it wasn't working for me. I think I realized that a PhD is something around 8 years. I couldn't think of a project that I wanted to do for 8 years in neuroscience. I also didn't really know if I wanted to be at a lab bench every single day of my life, because that's what it is you come and you do your work, and you're basically in a lab. And I just wanted to have maybe more of a human element involved, maybe have science plus something else in my life. And so I just started honestly procrastinating and thinking about other potential opportunities. And so the only thing that I could think of was, okay, I'm just going to read. I'm going to read anything that's interesting to me, and I'm not going to really put a barrier on what I'm reading. And so I eventually stumbled across the whole food waste issue, that 40% of food is wasted before it's consumed. And that kind of just sparked a whole kind of a very deep dive, very long rabbit hole that eventually became this company.
So when you say 40% of food is wasted before it's consumed, is that a US statistic or a global statistic?
It's a global statistic published by the Food and Agricultural Organization.
And so, okay, so you had this aha moment, and then what do you do? Because I'm just like, I love that beginning part. You're like, and then I go incorporate the name. How do I pick the name?
No.
I call a friend, I call my parents. Like, I have this idea. Who do you call first to tell about the idea?
So I went to the grocery store because I was like, whoa, like I am one of those people that just takes it for granted that I can go to the grocery store at any point in my life, at any time, 24/7, and I have food available to me. And I don't even know where the food comes from. So I went to the grocery store and I asked, like, someone stocking the shelves, like, hey, like, where do these plums come from? And she was really helpful. She told me all about it. And then I realized that maybe it makes sense to just dig into the supply chain, talk to a couple of different people, talk to some grocery stores, talk to some farmers, talk to some people who are distributing food, and just learn a little bit more. Also, again, I don't think school is really my strong suit. So any excuse to skip class was one that I would willingly take. So if I had an excuse to go to a farm and not go to class, I was going to do it. So that's what ended up happening.
And so, what does the name Strella mean? Is that the first name that you came up with?
Yeah, so Strela means arrow in Russian. And so to me, so a lot of the air and space nomenclature in Russian, it comes from like a certain, I guess, family of words. And Strela is one of those. Actually, the first dog that was sent into space that came back alive was Strelka. So same word. So to me, it kind of signals progress. It signals technology, straightforwardness as an arrow is. And then in English, it's got a feminine lilt to it, which I really like.
I love that answer. I love all of it. I'm like, oh, that's the clip right there. I'm like, and I agree because the name Strella for some names with like our clients and companies that I read about, it's like it creates a very quick like gut reaction. And I remember the first time I heard the name of your company, I was like, huh, like I wanted to learn more. It's something about the name I love. And so what was the original business idea? And is it the same as the business idea that you have now? And I guess then what's the business model?
Yeah, so the original business idea, and it is pretty similar, is basically that the perishable supply chain isn't operating correctly for some reason. And the reason why is because we're not treating perishables like perishables. We're treating them as if they were created in a factory, as if they have an unlimited shelf life. But the reality is that we are dealing with biological organisms that are living, breathing, dying. And so this is kind of where my molecular bio kicked in, which was like, well, okay, if it's a living organism, is there any kind of information that we can, is there anything that we can learn about it that could help us do a little bit better moving it as it moves down the supply chain? So I started focusing specifically on produce, and basically realized that if we knew the shelf life, or at least the expiration date of produce, then we could do a better job making decisions about what to move and when. And that would help eliminate food waste. It would help bring better quality produce to the store shelves. And then the next step was how do we do that? Well, what's cool is that again, these are living, breathing things. And so we can literally hear them breathing or talking through sensor technology. And then we can interpret these communications between fruits and veggies and turn all of that into decisions to be made. So the way that I look at it is there's kind of no real guardian angel for perishable products in the food supply chain. Everyone's kind of just playing one gigantic game of hot potato with perishable products, but no one's really looking after the whole thing. And so that's kind of the thesis behind the company, and it's been that way basically from day one.
Yeah, it's like it's a definite like change the world thesis, and it's tackling a big problem, and I think you're very much onto something. Is anyone else? I guess you have competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. So the traditional way of doing this was to apply chemicals to produce. So basically spray them with something that makes them not die so quickly. And we still do that. And it can be very useful. I also think that we could get smarter with data and not necessarily modify produce, but rather just keep it the way that it is, but just be a little bit smart about the decision that we're making. But regardless of what people are using to kind of extend the shelf life of fruits and veggies, they're still going to go bad at some point. And so we still need to know when that is and what to do with it.
And how does the company make money? What's the business model?
So I call ourselves hardware-enabled SaaS. So we do have sensors. We have technology that measures the ripeness of produce. But mainly what we sell is data and more importantly, the decision. I can talk a little bit about what we do in apples, but basically we help apple suppliers figure out when to move their apples based on maturity. So it's really the most important piece is the decision. And so that's how we price.
So give me like a literal example. So you work with a farmer and the farmer pays you for the device or for the decision, I guess. Like tell me exactly how it works.
Totally. So I'll tell you a little bit about our apple business. So apples can be over a year old before they get to the grocery store, and this is because they're stored. And most apples are actually produced here in the PNW, which is why I live here, why my company lives here. So basically, a packer is the person who stores fruit, and a packer has dozens of storage rooms, and each one is filled with millions of pieces of apples, millions of apples. And the problem is that the packer doesn't really have too much quantifiable information about behind which door is the ripest fruit, basically. And so they rely a lot on their historical knowledge. These are usually like fourth or fifth generation growers. And so they have a good relationship with all the folks in the community. They rely on a lot of their instinct. But at the end of the day, there's no quantifiable information about which apple is the most ripe. And so what we do is we put our sensors inside those storage rooms and we tell the supplier which rooms to open first to send down the supply chain. We basically give them a 2-month heads up that the apples are going to not look so hot in order to get them down the supply chain in the right time. So what we do is we charge per room per year, in that case, per storage room per year.
And who is responsible? I guess I've never really thought about this, but I grew up in the retail fashion business, and part of what I always thought was interesting is like if you're negotiating, if like I'm buying Levi's for my store and the Levi's don't sell, some of the negotiation could be like, hey, whatever we don't sell, we get to kind of send back, and we're only going to buy a certain amount we're only going to purchase what we sold, basically. So if all the apples go bad, like 2 weeks after QFC buys them, who's responsible for that?
QFC. So in general, they're kind of like little checkpoints, I guess, along the supply chain where the ownership of the product gets transferred. So as soon as a truck arrives at the distribution center of a retailer like QFC or Walmart or Target, and they say, okay, we're taking this truck, they now own it. So any waste that happens is on them. But these are all like really big customers, right? There's only so many Walmart Targets in the world, and there's only so many Apple suppliers. And so in general, it's a reputation-based business. So if you're not supplying great apples, then you're probably going to lose the contract overall.
Yeah. So you're working with apples and what else right now? Pears.
We do apples, pears, and bananas.
And
Bananas
bananas.
are definitely a little bit different, but same concept. Basically, the idea is that you, as a consumer, should be able to go to the grocery store and always see that perfectly yellow banana on the store shelf instead of the stuff that we're kind of seeing sometimes, which is
The green
like
ones.
green bananas or mushy avocados or hard avocados, and then not really being able to make a good purchase, but then also like having food waste happen in our houses because we don't even know when this stuff is going to go bad.
Totally. And so I saw on your website, so you're working with the packers, which we kind of talked about. You're working with the retailers. I think we didn't really cover like in what way you'd work with a retailer, and then also importers. How do you
Yeah.
work with importers and retailers?
Yeah, so all of it again is basically organizing inventory based on maturity. But right now, the way that a retailer works is they just go first in, first out. So first truck of avocados into the warehouse is the first one that gets sent to the grocery store, not looking at maturity whatsoever. Well, imagine if that's the way emergency rooms worked for us, right? Like no matter how bad my wound was, it doesn't matter. I'm just treated based on the time I came into the door. Well, you'd have a ton of waste, right? You'd have a ton of death. And so what we're doing is we're saying we're going to actually assess the maturity of these avocados. We're going to take a look at what's going on. And then we're going to reshuffle your inventory so that you're always sending out the most ripe produce first. And that also happens to be the stuff that the consumer wants to eat, right? We want to go to the store and we want to see, the ripest piece of fruit on the store shelf. So it kind of works out in both directions.
And what about for importers? Same thing.
Same thing. So importers, they're dealing with shipping containers. So for example, it can take like 80 days for kiwis to get from Australia, New Zealand to the United States. And then basically what happens is an importer receives like a bunch of black boxes filled with a perishable product that are pretty old at this point, and they have to make a split-second decision about what am I sending to this retailer, what am I storing, what am I doing with my product. And right now it's all kind of a big guessing game. And so again, we put sensors inside the shipping containers, and we are able to say the shipping container is more mature than that one, so it's time to send that truckload to the grocery store as quickly as possible.
I love this business so much. I mean, seriously, you're executing right now beautifully, but I mean, obviously it's just in its beginning stages of where it can go. I think it's going to be truly a game changer. And obviously others saw that too, because you got some pretty impressive investors. Um, are you comfortable saying how much you've raised and where you are with all, have you just raised in a seed round?
I raised a Series A. So I raised an $8 million Series A about a year ago. I've raised about $11.5 million to date, and I'm probably going to go out for a B in a few months' time.
Yeah. And so who are some of your investors and how did you get in front of them? And I guess just overall, what was that fundraising process like for you? I'm guessing you're pretty good at it because you defined yourself as being straightforward and you're very clear in the way you communicate your ideas. And I'm sure that's helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm super good at fundraising. I definitely I took a couple of entrepreneurship classes in school. A lot of it was definitely learning on my own mistakes, and just trying to get as much information from people who had done it before as I could. I've got some great investors on the table. What I've tried to do was basically get a bunch of different expertise. So we have Union Labs, which they know a lot about IoT and kind of deep tech and hardware, alongside Catapult. We have Yamaha. Yamaha's on my board. Nolan Paul there has worked in ag for a very significant portion of his life. So he knows all about packers, all about importers, all about retailers, how they interact with each other, which is super helpful. And then we have other investors like Millennium Tech Ventures, Google Ventures, that provide network support. They also help with future fundraisers as well.
Yeah. And is Mark Cuban also an investor?
Yes, Mark Cuban is an investor, and we've had a couple calls.
I'm kind of obsessed with Mark Cuban. We watch in our house, we watch Shark Tank all the time, and he's our favorite.
Yeah,
We love him.
I remember like one of the calls that I had, I wrote up like a list of like, I don't know, 50, 100 questions. I was like, there's no way we're going to get through all of these in like half an hour to an hour. I don't remember how long it was. And we did because he has like an answer for every single thing. And I'm like, geez, like,
Yeah, he's intense.
yeah.
He's just amazing. I've heard him speak before too, and he's just cool. He just seems like the coolest person.
Yeah.
Um, I love that. So, well, that's exciting that you're going to go raise more. And how have you gone about, has it been organic, the establishment of your culture, your values, your strategy around recruiting, DEI, like all of that category of the business? Or did you go in with kind of a playbook or somebody telling you what to do?
Definitely not. I went into this at like age 20, so there's like no playbook for anything. I feel like, and I'm still very much thinking through these things, right? Like these are all living, breathing, changing things. I think in culture, there's a couple of things that are really important to me. The first one is that every single day is going to be different at a startup. Some people don't love that, right? Some people want like stability, inflexibility in their job. They want to know what they're kind of working on. That's not what a startup is, right? Every day you're doing something different, and you're also learning on the job. And so that's a really big piece of what we do. I think there's also knowing how to be comfortable in ambiguity, but simultaneously like not sacrificing quality for it, which is always kind of a really big give and take. So that's another thing that we're very focused on right now. But in general, I think the culture is we're all in this boat together. We've decided to go on this adventure together, and so we're going to cry on each other's shoulders when we need to, but we're also going to celebrate together when we have successes.
Mm-hmm. And what are you guys celebrating right now? Like what's on your mind as far as something that's exciting happening at Strella?
Yeah, so we're about to finalize a distribution deal that where we basically are now going to be selling globally, which is super cool. So we've traditionally been only in the US and mostly the PNW, but now we're about to have a bunch of international customers. So that's certainly something to celebrate. Right now we're all we're all hands on deck, like scrambling to get like something out the door, but we will celebrate once we've kind of got
Yeah,
the first push of product out.
that's super exciting. How many employees do you currently have?
We're at 17 right now.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible what you've been able to do with a lean team like that. So 17. And what are some of the, I guess, goals for this year and in the next 6 to 12 months for the business?
Yeah, so we're very much growing our Apple business, like I said, in other geographies apart from North America. And then we're also very much pushing on getting our next couple customers for our banana product, which is brand new. So those are kind of our focuses alongside probably a fundraise. So yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think you'll do great. And so I'm curious what, like, as we were getting on, we were talking about our list of things to do. Do you have any hacks for me or for our listeners of like ways to stay organized or to accomplish all of these things? I guess even generationally, like given that you're out of college only a few years, you probably have like more technology efficiencies than some people, or hacks of ways to get stuff done.
I think honestly, I don't have any super high tech ones, but one of them is set external deadlines, which come naturally. But I'm also one of those people who like procrastinates and stuff. But when I was in college and working on my startup, what really helped was to sign up for like a bunch of pitch competitions because
Mm,
I didn't want to look like a fool when I got on stage and like not have anything ready. So I did all my market research. I did all of my, competitive research, comp analysis, all that stuff. And so I was pretty prepared. So I think setting external, having external pressures and deadlines, and also sometimes holding yourself to things. So again, like before I graduated, I was like, okay, if I'm going down this kind of path that I don't really, I'm not sure if it's going to work out or not, I need to set myself some goals. And so what I did was I wrote in a Word document, if I don't get X, Y, and or Z by the time I graduate, I'm going to go to grad school. And then I forgot that document. I didn't look at it until my graduation date, basically, and then I made a decision to continue or not. So I
yeah,
think setting kind of having water lines is really important.
yeah,
And then OKRs as a company, OKRs are really important.
yeah. You have implemented OKRs into the company.
Yes, I think I think I'm actually a little dumb and I can't hold too many things in my head, but I can hold like my 3, 4 goals. And I know that every day that I wake up, I'm like working towards those things. That's really, really useful for me.
well, maybe you could come over to my company and to my house and help me with my OKRs. It's hard. I know that this business has a clear purpose-driven aspect to it, and I'm guessing when you're recruiting people that if this resonates in any way, which it should for everybody, that it's a passion thing for them too. Like, this makes sense. When you're going out to talk to potential customers, if they are saying like, yeah, no, thanks, but no thanks, is it because for what reason would they say no? Because it just seems like such an obvious yes. And I'm wondering if there's this blend of like, it feels like a feel good thing versus no, there's an actual ROI on the business, because the ROI on the business seems incredible. Like, and do you have any numbers that you can share around that part?
Yeah, absolutely. So in agriculture, the biggest thing is that it is kind of an old industry. So the biggest thing that we get is, I don't need technology. I've been doing this for generations now with my methods that my dad, my grandpa, my great grandpa passed along to me. So that is really the kind of biggest thing. To your point, we never lead with the sustainability piece. Honestly, like, I don't really have any sustainability investors. My customers do care about sustainability. Farmers do care about the 50 to 100-year outlook, because they are passing things down from generation to generation. What are you doing to impact the P&L of a business? So for example, in our Apple business, we charge $5,000 per room per year, and we save about $40,000 on average per room per year in waste. So there's a pretty significant ROI for a customer when they're coming in, and that's really what we focus on.
Yeah. So, okay. So my final question for you is, what fuels you?
Yeah, so I definitely think that you can go into a very long existential discussion about why we're here and what's our purpose of being. But I think that for me, it's to push the ball of human progress forward in whatever little tiny way that I can. And so, yeah, I think I'm very much fueled about making some sort of positive impact for humans down the road.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.